You are listening to the new man beyond the Macho Jerk and the New Age Wimp. Your host is men's coach Tripp Lanier.
Is the pursuit of your goals exhausting you? Who are you if you're not going big all the time? And are you unwilling to relax because you're afraid something bad's gonna happen? In this coaching conversation, I talk with a high achiever who's uncertain about where to go next in his business and life. He's realizing that the things he's done to become successful aren't sustainable, and this is scary. So, in this conversation, we take a look under the hood and help him access more of his power so that he can have greater flexibility, opportunities, and ease. What you're about to hear is an actual coaching call. The person being coached volunteered and gave explicit permission to have our conversation recorded for this podcast. I'm ready to dive in. How about you?
Let's go.
All right. Give me a sense of where you are today.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything touches everything in a way. So it's like, or another way to say that is like the way you do something is the way you do anything. And I know right now, I think just as far as my relationship with goals and like I've wanted to grow my business to a certain point. I saw a lot of growth last year. And I think what tends to happen is I get into this mindset. I'm an ultra athlete, right? So I run an insane amount of miles. And I tend to take that same approach when it comes to, I want this thing, which means I need to work 10 times harder. And while I know that's not the truth, I think that that's my default. So I think for me in a number of different areas, it's like, with business, it's like making a decision, which direction to go, what to focus on. And then, I mean, even in relationship too, it's a very similar position. I was married for 10 years. I have a 12-year-old daughter. She'll be 13. And when it comes to like entering into that institution again, I'm like, do I want to do that? So like, while I do commit and do things, I think that there is a hesitancy sometimes. And it's like, I think I'm looking for the feeling of, all right, let's fucking go all in. And I don't have that in some respect. And I want that. And part of me is like, is that the thing? Is that the metric? Like, is that the aim? Or is it something else? Like, I'm just trying to figure out, I guess, like overall, like how to make the decision and just move forward more powerfully.
Got it. I hear that you want to get a sense of where you're going next, but figuring out why you would choose that thing is a little up in the air right now. And you want to have, it sounds like you want to have some kind of consensus. I'm all in, I'm both feet in on this thing, and it's not quite there. Yeah. And so there's tension around that.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Who decides what you get to do or what you choose to do?
I do. 100%.
Yeah. Who within you decides?
I would like to think the higher version of me, right? Like the more empowered, more, not necessarily certain, but like the warrior version, if you will. Ideally.
Okay. All right, good. Yeah. I've learned that through my own experience and then also just working with a lot of people within us is not a singular trip, right?
Yes.
And it's more of a kind of a loud school bus on its way to home in the afternoon. It's pretty raucous in there, and there's a lot of competing voices, and there's a lot of, and each one of those voices represents a commitment or a desire or a fear or a concern. And in this process, it's helpful to give each one of them a voice to understand what they're committed to understand what they're fearing, and hear them out. So if this was a boardroom, we'd have all of these board members, but ultimately there's the guy that sits at the chairman, the one that sits at the head of the table. And it's the reason why I ask that is because everyone's competing for that chairman role.
Mm-hmm.
And we may have our fear being the chairman of our lives. We may have our not enoughness, the need to prove, the need to protect, the need to please. That may be the chairman of our board. And it may have always been that way. What happens in our life, though, sometimes we start to recognize I'm done doing it that way. I'm done with the proving or the protecting or the pleasing or whatever it might be. There's something else that's wanting to step in and really take that seat. And so as I hear you talk about these big decisions, and where in the past it was a little different to find that certainty of, yes, we're going in this direction, I wonder if there might be a shift internally there. Does any of that resonate for you?
The irony, Tripp, is amazing. I was just thinking about IFS and like the parts stuff. And I was on my walk this morning. I was like, I think I need to dive back into some of that work. So the conversation is perfectly timed, of course. But it definitely resonates. And I think, as you said that, my awareness was kind of oscillating, right? Like between the grip it and rip it, that's like, let's fucking go. And then the part that is a little bit more unsure and protected was the thing that really resonated in there. It's like, while I love to believe that I'm making my choices on my own volition, I also realize there's like, well, I don't want to disappoint this person. And like, well, what if I do this? Then there's these, I'm feeling this almost like conditional flip flop happening. Right. And it's, yeah, as much as I'd like to say I don't have the need for approval, it's just the reality, like it's in there. And there's some people I don't want to disappoint. And there's some people that I like, it sounds weird to hear it, but like to make proud. I'm like,
yeah,
what's that about?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's really nuanced. We start to understand where they're coming from. And I don't know if you're like me, but that part of me that in the past really enjoyed doing probably closer to your grip it and rip it version of you. I didn't challenge that one either. And a lot of times it was, well, who am I if I'm not gripping it and ripping it? And that feels like death. Just like,
it does.
Well, yeah. How
I
so?
identify with that part of myself. Well, I mean, like I said, I'm an ultra athlete. So, my last race was 100 kilometers, 62 miles. And I found myself telling the story the other day. I was like, yeah, I came in second place and it was my first 100K. And the part of me that identifies with the achiever and with the pusher and with that level of insane endurance, while I do believe it works in my favor a lot of times, I'm seeing that maybe it doesn't really work in my favor all of the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is where we could come back to that statement of how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yeah.
And maybe there's an opportunity here to relax that idea. What if I could animate and draw on that warrior ultra achiever when it's appropriate for XYZ? But maybe I would want to animate or bring out another version of me in another instance. And I have choice here.
I like that.
Does it feel, I wonder if that feels a little more open or less rigid or less, I wonder what that's like.
That less rigid, right? Like that when you just presented that, the idea alone, I was like, there was an internal exhale, right? It was a like a release of like, oh, that's cool. I can play the role when the role's necessary, right? Yeah. Like I can embody these different aspects or identities at will.
Yes.
I like the idea of that quite a bit, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So as we start to look around the table and we start to appreciate all the different aspects of you and the gifts that they bring, how they serve you, how they protect you in a beautiful way, in a necessary way, how they bring discipline to your life so that you can do A, B, and C, right? We can really appreciate the gifts that they bring and start to relax any of that rigidity, start to have a little more choice there.
Yeah. I dig it. it's interesting, like as this conversation's evolving, like I'm seeing like how stuck I am on that identity, right? Like how much I identify with the badass, the ultra athlete, the one who can like, I'll outrun you, period. Right. And like that, like cocky almost. Like, yeah, it's funny. It's funny to see that. Yeah.
Well, let's appreciate him. Let's talk about what he does for you. Let's own it, like flat out own it, what he brings to your life, how he gifts you.
Yeah, he's assertive. He's confident. He's fucking committed as fuck. Like, I will run these 100 miles or I will die. Like that's, yeah. When I started running more, not really competitively or professionally, but when I started to take it more seriously, I had just gotten divorced. I was fucked. I was just very mentally, emotionally, spiritually beat up. Like I just did not feel good. And I had the awareness in a moment to say, I need a goal. I think what I'm seeing right now is just like that part of me. I think I identify with it so much because it pulled me out of like a shit time. Like it was someone, right? Or an aspect of self that I needed. And there's part of me that's like, well, I can't relax that part of me because what if I slip back?
Very powerful.
Right? Yeah.
So on one hand, and this is, I work with a lot of achiever types.
Yeah.
And that's usually what's driving them. It's not so much what they're moving towards, it's what they're protecting themselves from. They're moving away from this thing or shielding themselves from that. Who am I if I stop this thing? Or what might happen if I were to relax this even? I can't even relax it.
And it's one thing to know that intellectually, but like I'm feeling the reality of that right now. And even the drive to like consume stimulants more, like I've got to keep that part moving. Don't relax for too long or else. It's definitely a moving away from.
Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I want to name that there's a doorway here, if we were to so choose, to then see who this part of you is protecting. Like the part of you that would feel like shit or whatever, fill in the blank. And this part has done a wonderful job to protect that part and kind of to ensure I never go back there.
Yeah. I'm not sure exactly what parts it's protecting, but what I'm seeing right now is like, even with my ex, it's like, if I relax and cooperate enough, I'm going to get blindsided.
Okay.
If I let the foot off the gas too much in business, then the flow will stop.
Right.
But like even like the parts of me that it's protecting, I think like the first word that came to mind was like the sensitive part, right? And not just sensitive emotionally, but like sensitive, like attuned. The more empathetic part, like the more compassionate part, the more understanding part.
Well, it just happened.
I just kind of saw like a relationship pattern and I was like, oh fuck, boy, that makes sense. This sounds horrible, but I'm gonna say it anyways. Even the part that's like, when my girlfriend wants to have a conversation that, like I love conversation, but like too many emotion conversations or too many feeling conversations that go too long, I'm just like, can we not talk about emotions for a minute? The push part of me, the ultra part of me, it's like, as long as I keep going, then I don't have to like visit these uncomfortable emotions or these uncomfortable things that maybe I don't want to sit with. Whereas before, and even now, I kind of said it that way. It's like, well, I don't want to have the long conversation. I think what's actually more true is like, I don't want to relax long enough to feel what's really there. Yeah.
Do you feel it now?
It's kind of like a touch and run, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm kind of feeling it. I'm like, wait, there it is. But wait, no, oh no. Like there's even the like subtle anxiety or subtle kind of like, even I can feel here, right? Of like, tears potentially wanting to come, but it's like,
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And not necessarily for any reason other than like, like don't feel that stuff too much, because then like you get derailed.
Okay.
Like unfocused, or like that's not a productive emotion, or like like that's kind of the conversation. Yeah.
That's beautiful. This is really, really strong. Let's zoom out because I want to help us both outline what's happening here. So if I'm uncertain about where I want to take my life next, and I have a pattern or a default to go to pedal to the metal, all out, and something's not quite working for me there. If I understand what's really driving that, sometimes, let's just say sometimes, I'm not gonna say all the time, but sometimes it could be a fear-based thing. It could be an avoidance pattern. And in actuality, that's more from a place of rigidity or contraction. I'm creating life from rigidity and contraction.
And control.
Control. Okay. Yeah.
Like if I do it this way, then it's like there's a level of certainty there, like predictability.
Even as you said that, I get, but it's a pretty limited choice, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I'm imagining, wow, what's possible for me when I have more choice? When I am, if I wanted to, I could go into those places.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Even for the range.
Say that. What do you mean?
Like, I think you made the analogy of a boardroom or like a table of advisors or something of that nature. And right now I feel very, not singular facet, like one facet, but in a lot of ways dominant in one facet. And I'm just starting to see, I'm very visual, so I can just see like different facets illuminating in there, right? Like it looks like range instead of one, it's many, right? So there's this, it's almost like I have more to access, and in accessing more, I can potentially not produce, even in my mind goes, produce more, but like maybe be more. I don't know, but like I'm just seeing that there's a range available that I've just scratched the scratch of the surface, right? Like maybe even just sniffed it out, but I haven't even scratched it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We could call this wholeness. I get to be more of myself instead of excluding parts of myself because they're scary or uncomfortable, or I might not be able to control that if I were to let that out.
Yeah.
I can now reclaim that. For some of us, wholeness is I'll be whole and accepting of myself once I cut these other parts off.
Yeah.
Right? I'll amputate these parts, the ugly parts, the insecure parts.
With that a little bit, yeah.
Right?
Just a little bit.
Yeah. And then I'll be whole. But the wholeness piece is I can be with this insecurity or this sadness or this whatever. I have choice there. And I can imagine that there are goals or desires from all of these parts, and I could be informed by them instead of dominated by them.
Yeah. I'm even seeing right now too, like the illusion of being in control, over identifying with the overachiever is actually less control. Because if I were like range, like the fact that I don't want to feel these other parts is controlling in and of itself, right? My first question is like, why the fuck am I afraid of those things? Like, what's that? Like, why be afraid of sadness? Why be afraid of grief? Like, why be afraid of compassion? Like, what's up with that? You know?
As you said that, I remembered a phrase you used just a minute ago, which was blindsided. What is that? How does that relate to that, what you're talking about?
Yeah, great question. So blindsided is the most recent thing where that was a reality was like my ex is with my daughter, and up until I moved here, we were we had 50-50 time. And then I moved here and it was more of a thing of she's going to stay with her mom, and then I'm going to be here and I'm going to do my thing. And I'm going to have her during the summer, and we worked out a great agreement and like did it without mediate, like it was great. And it was, we weren't doing any payment support or alimony or anything back and forth. And then I willingly, even though the separation agreement said I didn't have to, I started to pay child support because I was like, all right, cool, I'm going to move. Let me support, let me do this, X, Y, Z. And then I expressed a frustration with the way something was happening with my daughter going to school, and she was missing X number of days. And it's a very like special program. And it's like, it ain't cheap. It's like $5,000 a month. Like it's ridiculous. And it is what she needs. And I was very like kind of defensive. And I guess I sent like a less than great email. But what the result was I got served papers like a month later that attacked my integrity, that were a bunch of blatant lies, that I had actual physical evidence to the contrary. Like anybody that looked at it, be like, oh, well, this is just an angry person lashing out. And the result was that I ended up now I'm paying her less than I was willingly paying, because that's just how it worked out in the system. But for me, $12,000 later in attorneys and time and emotional stress and whatever else. So it's one of those things now where part of me is kind of on edge. So the blindsided is like, when I think I have an agreement and an understanding with someone, if they have a fucked day, they can decide to be like, well, fuck you.
Right.
And I'm just have to bend over and take it, for lack of a better analogy, but that's what's up. And it's just an interesting thread to
Where
pull.
could I be vulnerable? I'm just not going to give an opportunity.
Yeah.
To be taken.
Because it's a window. Like the opportunity is like, if I open that window, if I open that door, that can let an attack come in.
Yeah. And you wouldn't even see it.
No, exactly.
Right. It's just that the possibility is there if you were to open that window.
Yeah. So it's like this low level anxiety that just kind of like sits there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I totally get why you would pick that strategy and why you would be both feet in.
Mm-hmm.
And then look at almost every area of your life through that lens.
Mm-hmm.
To defend, or to, as you said, to be on the offense, to be out ahead of it.
Yep.
It also sounds exhausting.
Mm-hmm. It is. Definitely is.
Is it isolating?
One way it could be isolating is that there's only two people that come to mind right now that like I would actually share deeply with, that I can be like, yo, like two of my guy friends, I could call them at, they're just there no matter what. And whatever I need, actually three, whatever I need, I can just be completely vulnerable and honest. But I think there's part of me, definitely this part, that has to posture. It's almost like I can even, like what I'm seeing right now, Tripp, is like I can see and feel like if I'm even going to enter into vulnerability, and I'll start to like peacock, or like, and not even like in an extroverted way, but just like, I'll just kind of get that internal frequency of like, don't fuck with me kind of thing. And it'll come behind my eyes. I'll feel it in my body. And it's like, I become a brick wall. Right. Yeah. So I guess in some ways, if I were to look at it through that lens, like it can be isolating in the sense of not feeling as deeply connected with people as I potentially could. Yeah.
Yeah. I do that too.
Yeah.
I do that too. I catch myself through the day like, wow, I'm pretty armored right now.
Mm-hmm.
And nonetheless, I feel like I aspire to be that guy that can walk into a room and just have this big, broad, open heart and just welcome anyone in with a hug. And but that's not really how I would tend to walk into rooms.
No. Mm-hmm.
So if we zoom back out again, we're getting some distance from what was kind of the armor you've been wearing and not even able to see. It's just the way life is. But what we're describing here is that posturing or that armoring that is there, and it's reflexive. It's what you tend to go to immediately. But it can also become more of a choice. And it may not be the choice you make today or even in the next couple of months. But what it does is if we can start to create a little distance, we can have the conversation around what you might want for your life in these different domains. And say, well, what would I want if I didn't have to armor? If I didn't have to?
Yeah.
I might still choose to.
Mm-hmm.
But if I didn't want to armor myself and I could still find a way to have boundaries, what might I want to do in this domain? What might I want to do in a different domain? How might I want to approach that if I wasn't needing to push away these feelings or these experiences, or if I wanted to have more range? Suddenly we start to step back and we can embody more of this capital S self-energy of, oh, here's my heart again.
Yeah, it's the idea just seems foreign. It's funny. It's like that was the first question that or thing you've asked in this time we've been chatting, and I'm kind of blank. I'm like, "Duh."
Well,
like,
it's more of a suggestion.
Like, yeah, I know it's a suggestion, but like I went and visited it, right? Like I'm like, I don't even know how to compute that. What's that look like?
Let's pick a domain and we'll just play with it.
Yeah. Okay.
And this might be one of those things where they can map the brain and just be like, there's just no synapses there. We just haven't.
Neural connection is just gone.
There's nothing there. It's like a cow pasture.
Atrophied. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we can have some compassion for us that we just haven't worked this. We haven't approached life from this way, and that's completely fine. So. Yeah, what's a domain of your life that we could play with just as an idea?
I mean, the first one that came to mind was relationship, and then I was like, well, business, relationship those are the two like main areas. So like either one's fine, whichever one seems. Yeah,
you're the leader here. I want to help you lead.
Okay. Let's do relationship.
Okay.
No,
right. And so. What do you get about, if we're speaking in the past tense, about what, how would you describe does the armoring show up there? Is there a version of the armoring, or however you would describe it, that shows up in your relationship?
Yeah, I think in some areas with certain people, I can listen, receive, reflect, mirror, have compassion, have empathy, feel like it's a really like deep, honest, simple exchanging conversation, right? And it's not just a one-way street. It's not like them being vulnerable and me listening, but it's like a very synergistic exchange. And then there's sometimes like in my romantic relationship, for instance, where there'll be a sharing and I'm like, can this please be over? And I'm like locked down. And I'm just like no. Like, okay, breathe. This is done yet? Okay, breathe. Are we there yet? And there's this impatience, like if I were to analyze it or look at it, I'd be like, well, part of it is like, I think I don't want to like open myself up to being blindsided or being too vulnerable. It's like I'm in this conversation, I'm seeing how much I not just value certainty and predictability, but I kind of need it, right? Like I'm needy with it at the moment, where it's like, if I don't have it, then I feel just lost, like a fucking lost puppy. I'm like, yo, I'm geeking for some fucking certainty, period. And I need it. And it's not like playing the different roles and oscillating between and assuming different identities and playing the parts. It's more of like, I need this, because if I don't, then will happen.
What will happen?
Yeah, like the blindsided, or like, I'll become aware of something, or I'll have to have a long conversation that I don't want to have, or I'm very willing to have the conversation, but like only if it works out with my schedule. Right.
Okay.
Like, even if it's, we'll set up agreements in relationships. It's like, cool. If you want to do Imago, or if you want to do this particular way of relating, like, and you ask me at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, most likely the answer you're going to get is like, I can't have that conversation right now. Let's revisit that later at this time. I'll be more than happy to listen. You know, how you feel. I really care about how you feel and what you have to say, and yada, yada, yada. It's important to me, but you know, I can do the part. And if I were saying what I really want to say, be like, yo, I really don't want to do that because it could fuck up my day. And like, I don't want to feel that right now. And I don't want to have that conversation because I'm afraid of what's actually there.
You know, I want to point out that that's valid.
Yeah.
Completely valid. I don't want to create a story here that somehow you should always be ready to dive into something and have it derail your day if that's what you're doing. And that all of this is really want to help you come back to the choice. And you called it range, right? Mm-hmm. So it might feel uncomfortable to set a boundary in that moment because your preference is to stay focused on work. Makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't want to demonize. I don't want to make that bad or wrong. But if you understand, like, well, I actually do have the space and I could go there, but I'm making it. I'm
not hearing it as making it wrong. What I'm hearing, even in those instances where I am being just responsible with my time and with my commitments and appointments and production and whatever else I'm doing, there are definitely times where it's the latter. What I had said of if I said what I really want to say, it would sound like this. And I think there's a fear in there that if I even say like just revisiting the thing of I sent the email and I got blindsided, right? So there's part of me that's like, if I say what I really feel, then I'm gonna get fucking smacked upside the head, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And I'm just seeing right now that there's a level of feeling and honesty that I can at least start to communicate and not make anybody wrong in the conversation because it's just what's true on some level. I think there's definitely part of me that can go a little bit deeper and be okay with the fear and uncertainty and the vulnerability. And instead of the touch and run, what if I just hold there a little bit longer with the genuine curiosity of like, what's there? Right.
So I'm hearing that ultimately you'd like to have choice in those instances. You could always retreat. That might be a strong word, but you could always come back to this way of doing things, the armored way, the controlled way. But it would be nice to have the choice to expand there if you wanted.
Yep.
Right now, it doesn't feel like that's a good choice because it's too risky. There's too much at
100%.
stake.
Yeah, I mean, even like, you know, it's like anything, right? It's like the equivalent would be like, say, I want to rock climb more and just add like a new level of activity. Like I want to be able to do that and feel good doing it. And that's going to take doing it, period, right? So there's part of me that I'm seeing the need or the desire to be a bit more curious about what's actually true in these instances instead of like the very habitual story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's break it down because I remember I was working with a veteran. He'd been in combat and he was back and he was like, I'd rather be deployed. I'd rather be going out at night and kicking indoors, not knowing what's on the other side than have these conversations with my wife, which is a really strange thing to think, to consider.
Relate, man.
And I remember being baffled, but then when we picked it apart, we could see that it actually made a logical sense. And here's why. He had a ton of training. He had experience, which meant he had more capacity. And he wasn't alone. And it just made so much sense. It was the complete opposite. In the situation with his wife, he was alone. He had like very little emotional capacity. He didn't understand what these feelings were. And he didn't have any skills. He didn't know what the hell he was doing. Of course, he's going to go to where he's familiar and he's got capacity and he's got guys behind him that'll give their lives for him. It just made so much sense. Even though at first glance it just didn't make any sense at all. And so we could chip it down. Okay, what do we have to do to help with capacity, with skill, and do it in a way where you don't feel alone.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly it just opened up. Oh shit, I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not broken. There's not something fucked up with me.
Yep.
So when you described climbing, running, you've invested in capacity, skill, experience. Typically not alone. You're out there with others in various ways, right? It's community in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
How does that impact how we could approach some of these growth edges for you?
It's so simple, but just what you just described, the level of skill, capacity, proficiency, confidence, even that comes with that. I think it's more about that than it is about anything else, where it's just like, I'm just really unpracticed. And I am someone who, one of my top values is excellence. And everything I do with a level of excellence. So if I do, it sounds funny to say it, but like if I do compassion and it's not excellent and it doesn't fucking look like, Cirque du Soleil, right? Then I suck. And I hate sucking.
Right.
That feels really like, ooh, that feels like gut punch accurate. Like I like that a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, here's what I would offer as well is that this gets a lot more fun when it's okay to suck too. And that's part of the community aspect of it is, hey, we're all going to go on the dance floor and look like idiots. Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm aware. I mean, I coach my clients all the time. I'm like, look, anytime you start acquiring any skill or getting on video or writing copy or doing whatever the fuck, you're going to suck. Like I say this often, and now I'm hearing myself say it. I'm like, it's one of those many instances where it's like I'm coaching myself as I talk unknowingly or knowingly. Yeah.
Would it be allowed in your interactions, let's say, with your girlfriend, to just be transparent? I want to be better at this. I want to have more range here.
Yeah.
I don't feel very confident. I recognize I would like to have more capacity. There's things going on for me right now and currently in my emotional world. I don't have a lot of capacity and I don't feel very supported. So I want to name that instead of I've got to have it all figured out and I'm going to move in here. There's the expectation that I'm going to rock this. So right off the bat, it's just, I'm not expecting to do this really well. Why would I? And to let all of the air out of that balloon that you got to do anything. Yeah. Because in that right there, that's relationship. That's it right there. Yeah. Here's what's going on for me. Here's what's really going on for me. And I'm letting you see that. I'm here. This is where I am in this moment. And right there, trust is established.
Yeah. I dig that. I like that a lot.
Not relationships on the other side of me getting shit right.
But it is, Tripp. No, I'm just kidding.
I got a fucking gold medal in relationship, right? It's just like, relationship is like, all right, in this moment, I'm here, and this is what I'm feeling and thinking and wanting. And 2 minutes later, okay, this is where it is. I like to ask guys, like, is this how you fuck? Like, is this like, you just like, okay, today's thing, I'm going to get 50 fucking pumps from this thing. I'm going to get 50 pumps on that side. And then, we're going to wrap this whole thing up and I'm going to be done.
I mean, it kind of is not in the quantitative as you describe, but in the like, yeah, I'm fucking good, period. Like I have to be great at it. Right. Okay. It's like, yeah, I'm just seeing that baked into everything I do. It's like, I've just got to be the best.
Yeah. So relating could be where are we now? Yeah. Instead of how do I look? How am I doing? How am I performing? But what's going on for her? What am I noticing in her?
Yeah.
I'm noticing her breathing. I'm noticing her temperatures. I notice her skin is changing color in these areas. We're riding that. Oh, I noticed I started doing something else and she went away. Okay, I'm coming back. And that's relating.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's different. Not performative.
It's definitely, it's just, I'm noticing like how performance driven I am. Like I knew it, but like I didn't know it at this level.
All right. Now we want to appreciate that guy
Oh, 1,000%. Yo, he's staying. He ain't going anywhere.
Right. But he may not be the guy to lead your
He may not be driving.
areas.
Yeah. He may not be the chairman of the board as we described, but like, he can be the VP for a minute or something.
Sure.
Right?
He's big. He's
Yeah.
earned his spot. Right. And in some areas he's probably not the best guy to be leading some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. That right there.
Right.
Is like, who's leading? Just like to come back to that. It's like, up until this point, there's been this notion of, if I'm embodying a different part of me, then this part's done, gone, finito. Like, there's that fear of like, well, what if he doesn't come back? Like, first of all, he can't not come back. It's just unrealistic. But just even visually, right? Like resting into the vision of that, of like, oh, homeboy's still here. Like, we're good. And we're just leading with this other part right now.
Let's go bonus level.
Okay.
Performance guy dies.
Okay.
What happens?
I mean, initially when you said that, I was like, I would feel lost and be like, what the fuck?
Mm-hmm.
And ironically enough, though, too, like I got injured maybe like 6 months ago, foot injury, and had to, take off 8 weeks of running. Instead of running, I got back into lifting and put on like 22 pounds in 2 months. So like I put on a significant amount of muscle. So it's fascinating to even see. But I did also get back into like my meditation practice and like some softer stuff. But like seemingly when that part of me died, right, even temporarily via injury, I still found a way to to resuscitate him, right? Like I defibbed him. He just came back as a power lifter instead. So yeah, I think, like just to play the game, right? Like there's a certain level of anxiety that comes along with that part of me dying, right? There's almost a reflex of who am I now? Like instantaneous.
Imagine the confidence you would have on a deep level, not as that part of you, not as performance guy, when you're blended with him, but to know that that part of you could die and you'd still be okay.
Yeah.
That's why I said it's a bonus, because right now it's just like, as long as I can preserve him, I'm fine.
It's good that you caught that. That's like that's ninja level right there. But yeah.
And then imagine that level of wholeness. Like, I'd even be okay if he wasn't here.
Yeah, I can get in that direction. If I said I'd be okay, I would just be giving a lip service right now.
Right.
Because like
you might not be okay.
I can feel in my stomach like I'm uneasy.
Right.
Period. I feel uneasy.
Sure.
And it's like,
yeah. And as you would, right? Yeah. I offer that because I want you to see. It helps to just recognize I am really attached to this.
Yeah.
And if I'm not careful, this will become everything in my life.
Yep.
Whereas I can really prefer this part. I really love this. I feel really strong and confident with this. And I am not that.
Mm-hmm.
That is not all of who I am.
Yeah.
This deeper work, right, is like, who am I really? Who am I really? Who am I really underneath this part of me that always needs to be performing or else? And this is where we start to access that deeper capital S self, as we've been talking about. Just so we have choice. I mean, we're not trying to kill it, but it is a mental exercise to like feel that part and create just enough daylight to come through and go, oh.
Yeah. It's fascinating how much like like I'm not holding my breath, but I feel like there's a fucking gorilla on my chest. Even just in the conversation of it, I'm like, bro, that's intense. That's amazing. That's fascinating. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. It makes a lot of sense though. And it really, honestly, it snaps, a recent chunk of time into perspective. I'm like, oh, okay. So that feels more like part of the lesson. It's like, if that, who am I really? That question is, I mean, maybe one I'm answering forever, which I'd have to be okay with. And it's fascinating that, that identity holds so much weight.
And it's totally okay.
Yeah.
What this does is it gives you a lot more range when you are considering, where do I want to take my life now at this stage? What trajectory do I want to put myself on for this next phase of my life? Am I eclipsed by this part of me, which is rooted in whatever wounds it has, but also in whatever strengths it has? Do I want more choice? So I can, just by creating that daylight there and feeling a little bit of that trepidation that, oh my gosh, I wouldn't be okay without that. And it's okay. You can sit over there for a minute. This is not all of who I am. And then the exploration can begin and start to access more of, who am I when I'm not just that guy?
Yeah.
And you might find some different answers to these deeper questions about where you want to take relationship, work, how you treat yourself, how you treat your body, how you do X, Y, Z. And feel that is, from my perspective, that is the freedom.
Yeah.
Because what we described there is that I'm free as long as I'm this guy. Right?
Yeah.
As long as this condition is met.
Yeah.
Or could that relax and I'd still find my footing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. That's deep. We're getting into some more existential stuff.
It's very, it is it, period. Right. Like on men, it's not just at the depth, it's at the it's everywhere. And I think that even just the awareness of the thing starts to be like, wow, just my nature. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, how can I access other parts? Like, who am I really? Like, these are now, they feel like living questions, right?
Yeah.
Or like a good old Zen koan, right? It's like, let's have it be this thing that never gets answered, right? Just the question in and of itself is useful. Yeah. Dig it.
To me, this is, as I'm speaking to you, coach to coach now, where we can, I think, really serve people. If we want to help them perpetuate whatever pattern they're in, then we just say, cool, let's answer the question through the pattern that got you here.
Yeah.
That has you perhaps feeling exhausted or rigid or tired or whatever it is. Or can we help to relax that pattern, start to access more of what's underneath it or beside it, and find another possibility there? And that will disrupt, that will kind of have things feel a little wobbly, but it doesn't have to happen immediately. But just that, it's like, oh, wow, there's so much more space here. It's like as if the rib cage, like you said, that gorilla comes off your chest. It's just like, oh, yeah, I have so much more available to me.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Like, even as you say that, like, I'm seeing moments in a day where I have the option to work harder, continue working, continue, not even just like the activity, but the pace, right? Like the pace, the internal pace, right? Like almost like an emotional pace. And I have the option to continue as is, or to shift. And most of the time, sitting down to change the pace is like, oh, it's uncomfortable, right? Like it seems like a lot of effort. And I'm like, oh, that's a point, like a moment that I can start to relax into different parts and different aspects. And at the very least be like, cool, like what would this feel like? Or what would this be like? Or like, how does this operate when this part's leading, or like really starting to, play musical chairs, if you will. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds fun. I like that. Yeah.
Let's break that down, because I think that could become one of the things that is a practice for you, if we could create a little structure around that.
Yep.
So, okay, I'm noticing that I am running at this pace emotionally.
Yeah.
How would you spur yourself to explore another possibility, or just to recognize that, okay, this is a pattern. It doesn't have to be the only way I do something. I want to have more choice here.
Two things come to mind. Like the first thing that came to mind was having some kind of a trigger, right? So it's like, if I'm working, have my glasses on, and then when I'm done, take them off. And the act of setting them down is like, all right, cool, let's embody something else, right? So like having a definitive shift that's signified by something physical, right? And then the second thing that came to mind, which is my answer to most things, is how can I put that in my schedule? All right, because if it's on my calendar, it's going to happen. Like a true high performer. But yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. I was like, cool, like, can I practice just like, if I chunk out, if I block a couple of hours and just lead with a different part, even in a practice or an activity or something that I would normally lead with ultra, right? That could be fun.
Okay.
Like having like a block of time. It's like, all right, cool. Like for these 2 hours, your mind, your heart is not going to go to let's fucking go. It's going to go to, oh, I hear you. Or whatever the fuck. Even saying it, I'm just like, something that's a little less cliche. You got to realize too, you've been in this game for a minute too, bro. It's like, I've been doing the versions of what I do for like 15 years. And it's just like, I've seen some douchery in the day. Let's just call it that way. But yeah, finding something that's a little less, that feels more genuine is really what I'm aiming at. But also realizing that it's going to feel awkward, right? Like it's like learning to walk or crawl even, and doing something different. So I think those two things for me are pretty, I'm definitely a creature of habit. Very well trained. I mean, I also read Atomic Habits like every 6 months. That's how habitual I am. I need a refresher on how to be more structured.
Great. So I want to just throw out that even if we were to chunk that down to developing an awareness of who's at the head of the table right now.
Yeah.
That in and of itself, that ability to okay, it's performance guy, or it's insert whoever, right? Just having awareness, like, and actually, what does it feel like? I notice I talk a little different. My posture's a little different when I'm doing this thing. I notice there's my brows furrowed when I'm doing that. Like, and no criticism, just like, cool. And you can even be in like, what do you need right now? What's the thing you're committed to? And to listen, like, well, if we don't fucking do this thing, then it's gonna we gotta I gotta, great, and thank him. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
And that right there, just developing that awareness of who's running the show, or who's driving the bus, however you want to say it, is wonderful, because what that does is it starts to open up. What are you committed to? What's the concern that you have right now? You start to break out of that autopilot.
Yeah.
And it just be like, I'm doing this right now. This is the guy. I'm going to choose to be this guy right now. Or I'm exhausted. I'd like to try something different.
Yeah.
And there might be a negotiation. Hey, can we make this an hour? Nope. 15 minutes? Yeah. Cool.
There will be a negotiation.
Right. But that's relationship, right?
Yeah.
Instead of trying to strong arm ourselves. And I think that's where this dominant thing.
And that is the pattern, right? The strong arm, the like, that's, it's just tired. I'm tired. I fucking go for a run. I don't give a shit.
Here's the key to this is that if we don't trust ourselves, if we don't trust the system, we're not relaxing control. It's just not going to happen. So we develop trust by familiarity. I'm like, okay, here's this guy again. He's having a conversation with me. All right. He keeps showing up and he keeps offering, hey, you open to another thing or whatever. And it's like befriending an animal, so to speak. I don't know if you've watched, anybody work with animals, but it's, just fucking go in there and hit them. You through time, exposure, little food, little, hey, how can I support you? And then that's where the trust comes from. And I want you to see that nothing's going to change as long as there's fear of loss, of that loss of control.
Yeah.
So if you can develop that inner trust of, I can relax this a little bit and it'll still be okay.
Yeah.
But if you go in there with a stick, he's just he'll beat your ass because apparently nobody beats him, right?
No, he will definitely.
So
fight
don't
to the end.
get into a fight with him. Don't get into a fight with him.
Ironically enough, the most recent quote unquote injury was, as I said, I do boxing and fight training and stuff. And a couple weeks ago, I got punched in the throat. So I don't know if you've ever, that's the first time I've ever suffered blunt force trauma to my Adam's apple, but it sounded like I lost my voice. Like I couldn't talk for 3 days and then for a whole week. And the irony of it too was, right, it's like the throat, thyroid, authority, will, expression, voice. It was just like, I couldn't produce the videos I produced. Like, I mean, I could have, but it was painful. So I was just like, I'm not going to do it. I had to like move calls. It was fascinating to have that happen. And the reason that came to mind too is like, as you're saying this, I'm like, wow, like I have very one mode of communicating. And while I've entertained the idea of, finding new ways to do that, sometimes God says, oh yeah, you're not going to do it. Let's find out, bro.
Right.
Yeah. So that's cool.
All right. So we started today's conversation with trying to help you figure out the next steps for you. And one of the first questions I asked, well, essentially along the line, who's deciding, right? Who gets to decide these things? And then we started to unpack that there were different aspects of you that were committed to control and protection. And then there were opportunities for expansion there to be less rigid. And that it sounds like with practice, developing skill, right? Developing greater capacity to be with that. Well, is it okay if I give a little control over at this time? Those types of things that we can start to give voice to these other aspects. And you might have more information to select in a future conversation, where do I want to go if I'm not just going to be control performer guy? That's what I'm taking away so far. What would you add or change or delete from that?
I mean, just the whole idea of, I feel like I've made most of my decisions from this one part of myself. And now I'm just like, wow, how fun could that be to have like a fucking entire board, if you will, of different ways to make decisions from different places. Like that sounds like amazing.
Cool.
And just being able to explore, it's even like exploring the possibilities because, like perspective from those different perspectives or from those different aspects or parts of self, they make very different decisions, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
And I'm very curious to play with that and to explore that.
Great. Yeah. Is there anything that comes to mind for you that would help you along this path? Is there an agreement that you and I could create, something you want to play with? This has been okay, cool. That was a great conversation, but is there something we could help you implement?
I mean, beyond that, I don't think so. As far as like just training the different parts and like, maybe it's scheduling the time and leading with a different part. And I think you said something to the effect of just having the awareness, or I'll often have an alarm with questions on my phone if I'm training something, right? So I could even just set an alarm that says like, who's leading right now, right? Or just having these questions come up. So it's when it comes to engineering ways to implement takeaways, I'm could probably gather, I'm pretty strong in that department. So I feel very good about baking some of those practices in. And maybe even like going full days, like letting another part lead, like that could be fascinating, right?
Cool.
Like, yeah, it's just, I'm intrigued right now with like it seems like it could be kind of fun. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Another practice, I'll just throw it in there. I call it the Monday morning quarterback, which is to look back at your day or to look back at a scenario that happened and say, how might I have done that from this part? So we're less relying on being able to catch ourselves in the moment. It's pretty hard, but it does allow us to rewire our brains and see ourselves in that scenario as this part, or animating these things and okay, I might have done this or I might have said that. And not, again, no criticism or anything like that, but it just like, okay, that would have been a little different. And we can slowly close the gap between, if it was 6 hours ago and to, 2 hours and 1 hour. And then maybe in the present, I can feel the part of me that wants to puff myself up. And I can also feel the part of me that wants to relax and get curious and turn into this thing. So, so there's
like that a
too.
lot. Yeah.
So
like
that could be, and that's a little easier to schedule. I could say, hey, at X o'clock, I'm going to journal. I'll pick a interaction I had and just play with that.
Yeah. I like that one.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Cool.
Awesome.
Anything else that would help you today, man?
No, that was great. That was really good. Yeah.
Would you be willing to shoot me an email in a month's time and let me know how things are going? Okay.
Absolutely. Yes.
Let's check in. Agreed?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Right on, man. I really enjoyed our conversation today. And,
Likewise.
Your language was saying you're not comfortable going into these places or you're resistant to going. I want to point out that you did.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, awesome. I appreciate your coaching style too, man. This was it was very fluid. Like I enjoyed it.
Right on. Very cool, man. All right. I look forward to hearing from you, man. And if there's anything else I can do to support you, please let me know.
Awesome. Will do, my man.
All right, buddy. Take care, man. See you.
Cheers.
If these interviews are helping you, please leave a positive review on whatever podcast app you use so that others can discover the show more easily.